Diane Scott from the Chirp podcast, and today I have Kyle Vamvouris on the show today, and I am absolutely ecstatic to be chatting to you, Kyle. We have lots of LinkedIn things to talk about, but obviously we want to talk all things sales, and I think that social media plays such a role in that. So welcome, and I'm really pleased to have you.
The pleasure's mine. I'm really excited to jump in.
Wonderful. So, Kyle, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are.
Totally. So, my name is Kyle Vamvouris. I started a company 3.5 years ago called Vamvouris, where we help B2B software and service founders build a repeatable sales process. So it kind of looks like any step of the journey from going from the founder selling to hiring the first sales rep to a sales team to actual leadership and mid-level management. We sort of help our customers go through the journey of developing a really strong revenue organization. And we've worked with over 60 companies at this point now, over 100 million in sales across them, and they've raised over 280 million in mostly VC money. Only about 30% of our clients are venture backed, but for those ones it works really well for. And that's really it. That's the short version. As far as my own personal background, I started as an SDR cold calling, got promoted to an account executive where I was a direct salesperson. Then I started leading teams. I've written a couple of books. And like I said, 3.5 years ago, I decided to break off on my own and start Vamvouris.
That's amazing. I mean, 3.5 years and you have had your 60 clients. That's quite an impressive track record. Do you think that comes down to knowing how to do sales? Is that like your secret to success?
Maybe part of it. I would say one of the things I'm thankful I did very early on was focus on SEO. So I was always writing blog posts and focused on what keywords that we wanted to rank for. And it took a while, but once we crossed like the 1.5 year mark, then all of a sudden we started seeing more consistent inbounds come from Google, and that's helped quite a bit. So I think maybe that knowledge of how to do SEO myself was really helpful. But then, of course, being able to actually close deals is definitely part of the equation.
Absolutely. I mean, as you know, I work with startups as well, and we often very early stage startups looking at how they build their brand. But one of the things that always comes up is I suppose, especially in that beginning time where money is tight, do they put money into marketing or do they put money into sales? When do you think is probably the best time to really look at your first salesperson? Or should the founder stick to doing the sales and maybe push some money into marketing? What are your thoughts around that?
It comes down to the bandwidth of the founder. So if you're not doing enough sales calls, then you should probably focus a little bit more on marketing and figuring out how to generate sales calls for yourself. If you're doing a decent amount of sales calls and it's taking up a lot of your time, then it might make sense to start bringing in a sales rep to take over the sales calls that you're currently doing, which gives you the bandwidth to focus more on generating more pipeline. Maybe that's a function of marketing, or if you're doing outbound, a function of that, or other areas of the business that are a priority. Maybe your support's needed in product or customer success, something like that. So I usually have the founder kind of audit their own workload and say, gosh, where can I really have more impact? If I need to bring somebody in to do cold outbound because I'm not doing any appointments at all, maybe that makes sense. If you need someone to help with sales, maybe that makes sense instead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can think back to like a very early stage of my career. I had a business that was going really well. And I think one of the things where I went wrong was that I hired a salesperson too early and handed that process off, which was a real shame because actually when I took the sales back, we did incredibly well. But unfortunately, I think maybe it had a massive impact on our success. And I think what you've seen is that startups often have early success, but then the wheels kind of come off once they raise money, when they start to actually scale up their operations.
Well, that's incredibly different. Yeah, being able to scale is so challenging. When you get a big influx of cash, you need to be able to spend that cash, especially if you have a board now that, a bunch of people who invested in your company who want to see sales numbers improve. That's a new added pressure. What I would say about early on is your first sales hire isn't necessarily there to get you out of sales. It's there to get you, I mean, really to get you into sales and figure out like, how do I enable this person to be successful? What a lot of times people do is they'll hire their first sales rep and then they just ghost and are like, great, now someone else is handling it. They're supposed to be
Yeah.
good. And that's incredibly challenging. It doesn't really work very well. But if you stay with that sales reps, you're very like hand holding through the early stages of developing a kind of a true sales process, then you're going to be much more successful. And as you bring in more reps, you can start being a little bit less hands-on and just a more operational as far as how often you meet with them, what you cover in those meetings, that sort of thing. But when you hire your first sales reps, you're equally as hands-on until they're up and running and they're consistently closing deals, and you can start to back away.
Cool, but I guess there is that fine balance between making sure that you're not micromanaging that salesperson, because that, I mean, that's the other end
Maybe,
of the scale.
I kind of say like you sort of have to micromanage in the beginning. They're not like in a negative way. I mean, it really depends. Like I feel like micromanagement, the spirit of being against micromanaging is giving people autonomy to try things and see if it works or if it doesn't work. You can give people autonomy while also being in the room, figuratively speaking. So it doesn't have to necessarily be like a negative micromanaging experience, but being very available, watching sales calls, like on your drive to the office, listening to the sales calls that are taking place. These are all things that are really important. And I think people want to kind of be balanced. I think it's really more about attitude than it is about the number of times you're meeting with a rep or how often you're having conversations with the rep and how often you're listening to sales calls and that sort of thing. It's more about your attitude. And I think, at least in my opinion, we should be very focused on enabling that sales rep to be successful. And we're best able to do that with the more touch points that we have with them. So if it's your first rep, I think you actually should probably lean a little bit more towards micromanagement, but still have that attitude of we're learning, we're experimenting, let's try things. What do you think will work? Be collaborative, right? You don't have to hammer down a process that you don't even know if it works or not, but you do need to be really heavily involved. And I find that a lot of times founders flee when they hire their first sales rep because they feel like they're finally out of the sales process. And that's a little too far in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. So in terms of like when you're looking for that salesperson, that first hire, do you think that sales is kind of a nurture or nature characteristic? Can you teach someone to be a good salesperson, or are they just born a good salesperson?
It's definitely a mix of both. I would say you could teach anybody to be a good salesperson. Some of the best salespeople I know are more introverted than they are extroverted. But then there's that classic sales persona of really high energy, extroverted person who's going to do really well. I find that it also depends on what type of sales that they do. So if you're more of an SMB and it's a transactional sale, so maybe you do one demo and you're trying to close at the end of the demo, I find that the more extroverted classic sales persona does a lot better there versus more complex sales, maybe enterprise, you're closing larger deals, there's more decision makers. A lot of times I see the more introverted people do really well there because they're more organized, they do a better job keeping track of things. So it really just depends. But generally, the more kind of outgoing, optimistic, the better you do. But it's more of a general rule of thumb than it is an actual rule of law.
Absolutely. So, of course, I'm going to ask you about your LinkedIn journey and the importance of visibility and presence on LinkedIn for salespeople, but also for founders. Like, how have you seen that LinkedIn journey grow for yourself?
So I had a really like love-hate relationship, probably more hate relationship with LinkedIn when I first started, or for a long time, really. I would spend a lot of time trying to write like very thoughtful posts, and I was writing consistently, and my growth was incredibly slow. And 3.5 years that we've been in business, I've closed one deal from LinkedIn.
Wow.
That's a pretty low number. And then I have friends who do a lot better than that. So I was always thinking like, gosh, I just need to crack the LinkedIn code a bit here. And it's challenging. Then I changed my approach. This was about 4 or 5 months ago, and I decided to go with really high volume posting, and that has worked a lot better for me. All of our numbers have skyrocketed, going from like 50,000 impressions a month to like 600,000 impressions a month, like just crazy differences.
Yeah.
And we're able to kind of engage with our target market a lot better now too, where we have conversations with them. I'll talk back and forth with them and book meetings through LinkedIn, which we had never really done before. So now it's picked up and it's gotten a lot better, but we've taken a very different approach than what I've done before in the past.
So tell me, because I'm fascinated by this. I know that we've had a little bit of a chat around what did you actually change that made all the difference in the last few months?
A few things, really two. One is the volume of posting, and then the second is our process for engaging in conversation, actually booking meetings. So let's talk about volume first. So what I was doing before is I was posting about 5 times per week, so once a day for the kind of the work week, Monday through Friday, and I would spend a good amount of time crafting those posts. I don't have like an exact number, but probably 3 hours a week of me like trying to write posts on LinkedIn. And then what I decided to do was go a very different direction and go from 5 a week to 14. So twice a day, 7 days a week. And in order to do that, I couldn't just keep writing the post the same way that I was writing before. So instead, I got a lot more fluid with my writing style, where I just sit down and just write short posts, almost like tweets, like shorter posts, just quick things on like what I believe and I've seen work before, and some of my thoughts on how to do something like this, and et cetera, like just really quick. And I would sit down and I would just kind of have a stream of consciousness and write as much as I could. And it takes me about an hour and a half and maybe 2 hours to write all 14 posts. Sometimes I even write 20 in that amount of time. So that was a lot better of a process for me. And that's what I currently do. So every week I sit down, I just try to write as many as I can. Sometimes I can get, 20, 25 posts done in that time. Sometimes I can only do like 15, but it, just depends on how like on my brain is. But that's my new process as far as volume posting. I started doing that. That had a huge impact. And then, for booking appointments, what I do is when somebody comments who I could sell to, I engage with them in a conversation where I just say, hey, are you just here for the content, or are you trying to improve your sales? And assuming they're trying to improve their sales, I'll go back and forth with them, ask them a couple of questions. And then, if it makes sense, I'll set up a time for us to meet and actually have a conversation. And we book about one appointment per day doing that.
And tell me, I'm fascinated. I think that you've got such a cool way of how you come up with those 14 posts. And I know that one of the biggest things that a lot of clients that I work with struggle with is, what do I post?
Yeah.
And you've got that. You were a comedian at one point. Was a stand-up comedian?
Yeah, I did stand up for 5 years.
Yeah. And so how does that help you now when it comes to creating those posts? Because I think it's quite ingenious.
Yeah, well, it's as I call it, my lazy method, because it just whatever makes it the easiest for me. And when I was younger, I did a lot of improv. And so in high school, I was like an improv troupe, and I did a lot of theater and stuff. Improv was really, really fun. And there's a warm-up game that you play called word association, where you say a word and then you say another word that's kind of associated to that word. And then you can do this with sentences and phrases too. And It's just something to like kind of get your mind operating quickly. So I sort of took the same exact thing with my postings, where I'll spend time writing the first one. And that's usually the toughest one for me. Like, maybe that'll take me 5 minutes, maybe even 10. Like, I spend a lot of time on that first post. Then once that's done, I go, okay, based on this post, what's like the next obvious thing that I think of? And then I'll write out that thing. So for example, let's say I write an entire post on, what your one-on-one meeting should look like with your sales team, with your salespeople. That'll be my first one. It's like, okay, here's how you should structure your one-on-ones with salespeople. And I'll structure, put in the structure. And then the next one is like, well, how should you structure your weekly meetings? And then after that, it's how many meetings should you have? And then what meetings shouldn't you have? And then, so then I'll write, and those are 3 posts now that I can write, and they become a lot quicker to write because the first one kind of primed me for the rest. And once I go down an entire trail, of posts, and maybe I wrote 5 on this kind of like a bunch of adjacent topics. It's almost like a game of telephone. Like the last post I write looks nothing like the first post. You wouldn't really be able to relate those two together in most cases. But I've gone through this full thread, and then I'll revisit the first post, see if there's something else there. So like maybe part of a one-on-one meeting is you should leave some time to coaching. Well, how should you coach an SDR? How should you coach an AE? What should you do if you're listening to cold calls? What should you do to structure your feedback that you're giving to SDR? So now I'm going on a whole nother thread, and I'll take that as far as I can take it, revisit the first post. And if I feel like I've exhausted all of those threads, I'll just go to another topic and I'll keep doing it. But usually those threads can go on for a pretty long time. I just keep writing adjacent things.
Amazing. So at Chip, the way we do it is very similar, but we do it with video. So we have a set of questions where we have prepared them, and we ask our client a question, and then based on the answer, we then feed off to the next portion of that question, and then come at it from a different angle. And so it's this nice kind of tennis game of conversation that pulls out the best information, especially for those who don't like to write.
Yeah. Well, I don't either. That process would work really well for me, because I find myself like I used to find myself really struggling with like what to write next, and I'm much better on the fly, and especially on video. Video's very natural for me. I love being on video. So anyway, that's a great process. That's another really good way to do it. I finally was able to figure out a way that worked for me without having to shoot videos for it, and I write all my own posts. So anyway, this has worked well, but the video, that's a really good process, I think.
Cool. We'll have a chat about that. I find that it works because people forget when they're on video. If they're scripted, they lose their kind of brilliance, their passion, and their excitement for what they're doing, and it always sounds scripted. Whereas if we're having a conversation, we just feed off each other and that energy, and you can feel the energy coming through in the videos. So that's worked really well, especially for people who don't like to write. So now, obviously, people are going to go right twice a day. One of the biggest hurdles I find is even getting people to post once a day. Now, you have posted twice a day, and something that we say often is that it almost doesn't matter what you post. Has that been your experience as well? Because I know, we spoke about the quality of your posts and how, in order to get that volume out, you've had to change the way you do it. Has the lack of time quality creating posts, has that impacted your impressions and your results on LinkedIn?
Well, I mean, look, I post a ton, and I would say probably most of them don't get much traction, but the ones that do really do. And, my numbers are proof that as a kind of a general trend, everything has been skyrocketing. And I feel like I'm putting in less quality than I was before. But here's the thing. I don't know if you as the content writer or me as a content writer, we're the right people to determine quality. It's the person reading it that determines the quality, right? How many YouTube videos do people watch where the quality of the video is really, really bad, but the content of the video is so good, you'll suffer through a poorly lit set to watch that video. So I'm not the right person to determine the quality of my post. There's this anecdote that I think of quite often when it comes to this world, which is there's a pottery teacher, and you might have heard of this. There's a pottery teacher that splits their class in half. Group A is graded on one pot, their best pot. You have one pot, and I'm going to grade you on that pot and the quality of that one pot. Group B is graded on the quantity of pots. So how many pots can you make? And at the end of the class, the question is, who do you think developed the greatest pot? Did the greatest pot come from Group A, or did the greatest pot of the class comes from Group B? And the answer is Group B, because they're less worried about perfection, and that allows them to freely create, and then they end up developing perfection. And I think that's a really powerful story to remind ourselves that sometimes just doing something a lot, you get way better at it, even in that free form state than if you were to sit down and spend all of this time on one thing. Now, I know people who take a different approach and they spend a ton of time on one thing and it works really well for them. I haven't gotten it to work for me. I only know, I know less than a hand's worth of people of who are able to do it that way. I don't know if I do a great job determining whether the thing I'm posting is good quality or not.
But the fact that you've seen this massive jump in engagement, and I did actually look at some of your stats, if you don't mind me sharing.
Yeah, totally.
Is that all right?
Yeah, of course.
So just looking at impressions, in June you had 216,000 impressions. And in September, or let's look at August. August you had 604,000, and then in September 537,000. Like that's massive, massive jumps.
Yeah.
And then if I look at because obviously impressions are really important when it comes to LinkedIn. And then if we start looking at follower numbers, that was just as impressive. So because you've kind of really proved my 90-day theory, in that what we see is that consistency starts to pay off at 90 days. And then at 180 days is when you see another big jump in your numbers. So for June, you had 404 new followers. And in September, or in August, August, you had 5,860 new followers, and September, 3,700 new followers. That's phenomenal. Yeah. And I just love that you've tracked this to see that it actually started at that double posting back in June, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, it was a very obvious increase, and I was surprised. Look, I knew it was going to go up. If all of a sudden you start posting a ton more, a lot more people are going to see it, but it ended up working a lot better than I thought.
Yeah. Amazing. Cool.
Oh, you're done.
What about in terms of sales? So, I mean, you start off saying that you'd only had one real meaningful sale through LinkedIn. What have you seen happen when it comes to actually booking sales meetings and then turning those into paying customers in the last few months?
Yeah, so I just started tracking this now. I was not expecting it to be as good as it has been. So I didn't start tracking it until a week and a half ago. So I don't exactly know, but I do know that we book around one appointment per day. Roughly.
Wow.
Some days we don't book any, but for some days we book two. It averages out to around one per day. And I don't know how many close from that. I know we've closed more from LinkedIn over the past couple of months than I have the entire 3.5 years. Again, I only closed one, but I don't have an exact number. Moving forward, I will, though. We have some later stage pipeline stuff that are LinkedIn only. So anyway, I'm tracking this now. I should have been tracking it from before, but I wasn't expecting it to be such a big jump.
Yeah, that's unusual for a sales guy, Kyle, that you haven't been tracking it.
Well, I hated LinkedIn. I was just doing it to do it. Like I found for me, LinkedIn was such a good tool for nurturing people that I had sales conversations with. So that's what I was treating it like. I was just posting content on there because I know that it'll keep me top of mind with people who are on the fence of moving forward with us. And then maybe a year later, they'll end up reaching back out to me. So I've had that happen before where they're like, I've been following you for 18 months now. And I'm finally ready to pull the trigger. It's like, great. And, that's really good. That justifies me spending this time on LinkedIn. I wasn't expecting a bunch of meetings on the front end from LinkedIn. So I just didn't do a good job tracking it. But again, the last week and a half, I've started tracking it a lot more. And I don't know, ask me in a few months and I'll have a better answer for you.
Well, I can't wait to see your results at 180 days because that's where we see the next big jump. Is at 180 days. So that'll be really cool to see.
Yeah, we're probably getting pretty close to that, right?
Yeah. So you are, if you're September,
June.
October. Yeah. So I reckon December, end of November, December, you should have your 180-day stats,
cool.
Which would be good to compare, to see how that comes out. Now, obviously, you've been building your business for the last 3.5 years. And, as founders, it's a rocky road sometimes. It's a bit of a roller coaster. How have you found the journey and how do you kind of manage, how important has your mindset been and how do you manage your mindset to keep yourself moving forward?
Yeah, it's one of the most difficult journeys I've ever done. I heard a quote once. I Yeah, that I think is extreme, but it's funny, and I think it illustrates the point, which is if I had known how difficult it would be, I probably wouldn't have done it in the first place. And I always laugh because I'm like, you know what, that's probably true. Um, that ignorance is bliss is definitely nice in the
Yeah.
beginning to kind of get you kicked off on the journey.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's one of the hardest things. I mean, just early on, like I've had situations where I didn't have enough money to cover payroll and was able to just squeak enough, cash out of our accounts receivables of just like calling people saying, hey, you haven't paid your bill to make payroll. Like I've had experiences like that. And I've had, big highs where I've closed a ton of deals all at once. And it was really exciting. So, I've gone through the ups and the downs. I don't know as far as like managing my mindset. I'm not too sure if I don't do much actively to manage it. I will say, like, I consider myself a fairly resilient person. I'm pretty calm under pressure. I do have situations where I don't manage it very well, but I think as a general rule, like I have some deep rooted beliefs that serve me quite well. So one of those, for example, is I believe money is pretty easy to get. So I'm not really too worried about money. Um, if my biggest problem is something that can be solved by writing a check, I don't really consider it that big of a problem because I can always recoup the money that I have to spend. I think that belief helps me quite a bit. The what I really struggle with is when there were times where I thought I was going to have to lay people off that I didn't want to lay off.
Mm.
Those are always the hardest situations, way harder than, I have to spend 30 grand for something, or I bought this program for 15 grand and it didn't end up working out. That stuff I don't really care too much about. So that's probably helpful.
Okay, amazing. Um, and what about like fitness? How does fitness play a role in your journey? Because you and I are both in Elite, Dan Martell's Mastermind, and one of the non-negotiables has been increasing our physical activity, and I've seen some real benefits. What's your experience been like?
Yeah, I mean, I think look, this is an area I've struggled with my entire life. I've gone through times where I'm very disciplined and focused, and I'm in great shape, and then I go through times where I'm definitely not. I would say for most of my time with my starting my current company to recently, I didn't value it, and I put it kind of to the side, and it was really focused on work, and that was a huge problem. Like I'm in a pretty physically, I'm not in a great spot right now, or I'm not where I want to be. But recently, I've kicked it into gear, and I've lost a lot of weight over the past couple of months. I'm feeling a lot better. So unfortunately, there's something in my brain that I have to manage where I almost feel like in order to be successful at work, I have to sacrifice personally. And I struggle
Mm.
with that quite a bit. Like even when, like this morning, I was swimming at the gym. That's like I have a torn ACL and meniscus. So swimming is the best exercise for me
Yeah.
because it's low impact. So I'm swimming in the mornings and I love swimming. But even then, like I find myself thinking of like, gosh, I need, I have a meeting. I have to get to the office. So I blocked off my mornings, try to accommodate for that, give myself a lot of extra time because I do get like meeting anxiety where it's like, oh my gosh, a meeting's coming up, and I'll be like looking at my clock every 5 minutes for an hour.
Yeah.
So that's always a problem. But little things like I'll
Yeah.
set a timer. If let's say
Mm.
there's a meeting in an hour and a half, I'll set a timer for an hour and 15 minutes, and I know the timer will go off, which means there's a meeting coming up. So to free my mind from that kind of anxiety. The gym, by having a lot of time after I'm done with the gym, at least like no meetings, I'll be in the office and working. But like, for example, I block off until 10 a.m. I'm in the office by 8. I could take a 9 a. I could take an 8 a.m., but I block off till 10 just so when I'm working out in the morning, I'm like free from that anxiety that a meeting's coming up that I need to be prepared for,
Yeah.
etc. So I'm not great at this, to be honest. Like I'm the first to admit, like I'll sacrifice my own personal goals for business goals more than I'd even like to admit. But I've done over the past couple of months a lot better at this, and we're moving in the right direction.
Amazing. Hands down, I have the same problem in that I have always sacrificed for the business. And recently, I've also decided that I need to get better at looking after my own personal health, and also done the same. Whereas, like, actually, it's fine not to be at my desk at 9 a.m. sharp. Like, I work for myself for a reason, and I do feel better for it. And I think you feel clearer and you can cope with the stress, the ups and downs a little bit better as well. So
Yeah.
I must say that I have noticed the big change in you over the last few months,
Thanks.
and you just look brighter. You've almost got this glow about you. So it is doing you wonders.
Good. Good. I'm glad someone notices.
So I hear that you have a new book coming out. Tell us
I
all
do.
about that and what is going to, when it's due out.
Yeah, it's coming out November 1st, and it's called 16 Steps to Repeatable Sales. So what I did, this is my third book now. What I did for this one is very different than what I did for the other ones, where I made this one more of a guide format. And it's very much do these 16 things. Here's the thing. Here's how to do the thing. Go do it. And I removed as much fluff as I possibly could. I'm not trying to convince anybody why this thing is the right thing to do. Like, I've taken all of that stuff out. You either trust me or you don't trust me. I've done this a lot. Here's my 16 steps that I follow with any company. And if you just go through these 16 steps, you too will be able to build a repeatable sales process. So that's what I did this time around. And I'm really proud of it. This is probably my favorite piece that I've written.
Oh, amazing. And where will we be able to get it?
It'll be on Amazon.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yeah, if you just look up
I
my
will
name,
mark
Kyle
my
Vamvouris.
calendar.
yeah, you'll see it for sure, and I'll do a push. I'm in November. It's exciting. Like, we're building up this launch list of people who want to purchase the book early or right when it launches. So we're going to do a big push in November. I'm also traveling a lot, so it should be a good time.
Amazing. Well, I cannot wait to get the book, because I think every business needs a repeatable sales process. And then obviously the repeatable marketing process, which we help with. But Kyle, it has been absolutely wonderful to have a chat to you. I love your results, and I can't wait to see your 180-day results. And I obviously, anybody who's looking to increase their sales and to build their sales teams, Kyle's website has got the most amazing resources, and there are just a ton of them. I want to download all of them and implement, and they're really step by step. So I would encourage you to go and have a look. So Kyle, thank you very much for joining us for today's podcast. I've really enjoyed having you, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.